Treehouse on the new PlayStation. Yep. Plus, I'm listening to Swindled.
Copeland says he shot his gun a few times to scare them away, but only in self-defense, of course. He was in fear for his life. In the end, no one was killed, but one man was wounded in the leg. Kobus regretted that, but it left him with no other choice. For some reason, Tobin hadn't anticipated the entire incident having caught on camera. The video told a much different story. In the footage, he could be seen wearing a yellow vest associated with a local vigilante group. His truck isn't surrounded. There's no threatening crowd. Just a calm, almost ordinary scene. That is, until Coben steps out, pulls his gun, and starts firing.
So he's just a terrorist.
Using the video as evidence, the Chilean court rejected Coben's plea of self-defense. He was convicted on 3 counts, including attempted murder, and sentenced to 11 years in prison. Coben was free again after only 6.
What?
Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away in Mexico, Jeff Furrick was clawing his way out of a deep post-CBC recession. He was dreaming of new ideas, even dusting off a few old passions. Ultimately, Jeff Furrick turned his attention to Acapulco, where he lived full-time, and launched an anarcho-capitalist festival called Anarcho-Polko. Marketed as a celebration of cryptocurrency, alternative health, and post-government living. The event was an instant hit, attracting tons of readers, many of them loyal dollar vigilante readers from across the globe. Some were so taken with the event that, like Jeff, they relocated to Acapulco permanently. Others, like Shane Quest and Miranda Webb, had no other choice. The young couple met at Kent State in 2012 when Miranda broke the ice with a compliment of Shane's Ron Paul baseball cap. They bonded over anarchist politics and traumatic childhood. Shane's father had taken his own life, while Miranda's mother, a lifelong addict, walked into a busy highway during a bad trip.
It started from birth for me. My mom was a drug dealer and a gardener, and my dad was an auto body technician who liked to work under the table a lot. The taxation was a big part of my childhood. They were very much like, fuck the government, fuck the police, fuck taxes.
Fuck college, too. Shane and Miranda dropped out, went off the grid, grew dreadlocks, and started making and selling hash oil. Back in 2016, an untimely traffic stop uncovered drug paraphernalia, and their destinies changed forever. Both were charged with manufacturing a controlled substance, crimes that carried a potential prison sentence of up to 25 years. So they ran. They think they could make it to Mexico in time for Anarcho-Polko 2016, the festival their idol Jeff Furrick never stopped promoting. Along the way, they shed their old identities. Miranda became Rose Forrester. Shane rebranded himself as John Dalton. Then, under their new names, they crossed the border. John and Rose went to the house, adopted a dog and a cat, and made a life for themselves in Mexico. At no point did they ever feel unsafe. If anything, they felt free from the oppressive American government. Finally.
You gotta have common sense about it, but I'd say it's safer than any big city I've lived in the U.S. Like, way safer than Chicago or something like that. There's so much that is more free about where we live here than where we came from. You could never do what we've done where we came from.
And in terms of Acapulco, it's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than anything I've experienced in the States.
The first thing Lou remembers hearing on the day John was killed was the dogs barking outside. He just finished eating lunch with his friend Jason and peered out the window to see a group of teenage boys throwing rocks at their house. John and Jason walked outside to confront them. Rose, delayed by looking for her machete, followed several steps behind. She heard the pop and ran to the gate to find her boyfriend, John Dalton, bleeding from the mouth.
Right, safer than Chicago.
Plus, they would report really as soon as they found out who she was. So instead, she recorded a video and posted it to Facebook asking for help from her fellow psychopath.
Somebody told me, please, I said, somebody showed up right after we finished eating and he shot John. And I shot Yes, another time, and I really hope somebody please come.
Most assume John's killers had ties to a drug cartel that was growing marijuana at home. Others said the cartel doesn't care about weed. Lily tends to agree. She blames a former anarchist roommate named Paul Cooper, whom they hooked up for dealing cocaine. Lily is convinced that Paul was in trouble with the cartel and shifted the blame to John. Apparently, he couldn't handle the guilt. A few months later, after John Dalton, aka Shane Quest, was murdered, 36-year-old Paul Cooper killed himself. Lily Forrester, once again Miranda West, now in her early 30s, still lives in Mexico. She says she found love again, crossed Cooper, and is working on resolving her legal issues in the quote, right way. And asked if she has any advice about fleeing the country. Don't, she advises. It's all racist. Find a way to solve your issues without offending. Miranda, like everyone else in this story, learned the hard way that absolute freedom is nothing more than an illusion. It was written, researched, produced, and hosted by me, a concerned citizen, with original music by Trevor Howard, aka The Former, aka Long Gone Silver. Read that recording. For more information about Kindle, you can visit kindlepodcast.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Kindle Podcast. Or you can send us a postcard at PO Box 2045, Austin, Texas 78768. But please no packages, we do not trust you. Whether it's a completely independent production, which means no network, no investors, no bosses, no shabby money, no bullshit. We plan to keep it that way, but we need your support. Become a valuable on Patreon, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify at valuelessone.com. For as little as $5 a month, you will receive early access to new episodes and exclusive access to bonus episodes that you can't find anywhere else. And everything is 100% commercial free. Become a valuelessone at valuelessone.com. Or if you want to support the show and need something to wear to Utopia, consider buying something you don't need at singlepodcast.com/shop. There's t-shirts, passes, hats, hoodies, posters, coffee mugs, and more. Singlepodcast.com/shop. And remember, use coupon code CAFE and you can 10% off your order. If you don't want anything in return for your support, you can always simply donate using the form on the homepage. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Hello, my name is Zenaida.
It's that time again. Time to dig up a classic single episode from the vault. Film fans, there's a brand new episode coming next week. Does it sound like the perfect time to revisit this unforgettable episode from June 2022? Called The Crusaders, and it tells the story of Nicholas Aliberti, who, as of August 2025, has officially and finally been convicted on some of the very charges we explored back then. I want to note that a lot has unfolded since this episode first aired. However, every bizarre twist in this saga has been documented in great detail on the Valuable News for Value Listeners update show that is available exclusively. So you guessed it, Value Listeners at valuelistener.com. It also seems like the perfect time to promote that when a brand new episode of Valuable News covering Aliberti's recent conviction drops soon. So go sign up. You get bonus episodes, early releases, no advertisements, no reruns, no buyer's remorse at all. I promise. ValueListener.com. I appreciate it. See you next week.
I probably will. I listen to a lot of Swindle. Probably will do that sometime.
This episode of Swindle may contain graphic descriptions or audio recordings of disturbing events which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Be forewarned. This episode is extra heavy. It contains descriptions of child abuse and neglect, sexual assault, animal abuse, and more. You might want to skip this one if hearing about such things ruins your day. No one will blame you. Progressive, Neil, I guess.
I guess. Yeah, I was like, enjoy.
Acknowledging why we're here this morning. January 3rd, a little girl died.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Sorry, I mean, what?
She was 9 years old, and she had people in her life who loved and cared about her. And
Really?
they're heartbroken by this loss, as we all are. And this is a tragedy that weighs heavily on all of us, myself included in it.
Michelle Roskiep became a first-time foster mother in 2011. In her application, Ms. Roskiep described her motivation for doing so as something extra. She had extra love to give, extra space in her home, and extra time on her hands. Just ready to do this, she wrote. Michelle Roskiep, a 56-year-old single mother living in Warwick, Rhode Island, had already adopted her 2 grandchildren a few years earlier. She felt that she could provide a safe and caring home for any child in need. Initially, Michelle asked to house several teenagers who were on the verge of aging out of the system. Ultimately, she settled on infants and preschoolers with disabilities. Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families approved Michelle Roskiep's application. On July 27, 2011, 2-year-old Danae was placed in Michelle's foster home. Danae suffered from a host of medical conditions, hydrocephalus, cerebral palsy, and epilepsy, to name a few. Danae required a special diet. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, she had frequent seizures. Danae would never be able to do the things that a quote-unquote normal child could do. But regardless, Danae's new foster mother loved her unconditionally. And so did Danae's brothers and sisters. Over the years, the Roskiep family continued to grow. On January 5, 2012, another special needs child was placed in Michelle Roskiep's home. 8 months later, a third foster child arrived. In May 2013, a fourth. In September 2013, a fifth and a sixth. By 2019, including Michelle's 2 grandkids, 8 disabled children lived inside the home. Michelle Roskiep had her hands full. Sometimes she had to rely on her 16-year-old autistic grandson for help. Thursday, January 3rd, 2019, was one of those times. Michelle Roskiep said she had the flu. Some of the children, like Danae, who was now 9 years old, were immunocompromised. Anyone who was feeling ill must keep their distance. That was the house rule. So that morning, Michelle instructed her grandson to give Danae a bath. Danae loved the water. It felt good on her hip joint, on which she recently had surgery. Michelle, or whoever was in charge that day, would typically fill the bathtub with 2 to 3 inches of water so that Danae could roll around and play. At 8:30 a.m., the teenager found Danae crawling in the hallway, covered in vomit. She cleaned her up and placed her in the bath like any other typical day. The grandson reportedly checked on Danae 3 hours later. The tub had slowly drained empty, so he turned on the faucet for a refill and handed his little sister a sippy cup to drink. Michelle Roskiep was apparently running errands or watching TV. At 4:30 p.m., Michelle Roskiep's other adopted grandson returned home from school. He went to use the bathroom and discovered Danae lying face down in the water tub. She was unresponsive. Danae had been left there for more than 8 hours that day, naked, cold, wet, and alone.
That's really sad.
Michelle Roskiep instructed the oldest to call 911. She ordered the others who were capable to collect trash from around the house and hide it in the basement while she performed CPR. 9-year-old Danae Roskiep was pronounced dead at the hospital. Her body temperature was a reported 87.7 degrees.
In January of 2019, Danae Roskiep was found unresponsive in a bathtub after being left alone for hours. Danae and Roskiep's 7 other adopted children all have developmental issues.
According to the police report, the Roskieps were living in squalid conditions. Quote, there was a pile of soiled diapers on the floor that had a stench of urine and feces. Detectives observed there to be bugs on the ceiling. The second bed had netting around it, and it was soiled with what appeared to be animal droppings. There was garbage on every inch of the floor, so cluttered that Danae's wheelchair couldn't navigate through it all. As a solution, that was untouched, sitting on the counter, still stapled inside the paper pharmacy bag. Police also found the family's 2 dogs, one of which was so malnourished it had to be put down immediately. The veterinarian later said they believe the dog had been poisoned.
It has determined that the
Talking
child's death
about
was caused by complications of cerebral palsy, including her seizures, and as a result of neglect. While not representative of DCYF, this case demonstrated that our safety net is not catching every single child, and that's unacceptable.
After a 3-month internal investigation into Danae's death, Rhode Island's Department of Children, Youth, and Families announced significant policy and personnel changes to its foster care system, including capping the number of children placed in a single foster home at 5. DCYF Director Krista Patola said that while these changes were in light of the recent tragedy, it was not a knee-jerk reaction. The reforms have been in the works for a while, she said. The department just wasn't able to implement them in time to save Danae Roskev's life.
We, like many systems, have been suffering from a shortage of foster families. So it's almost as though you have to solve problems A and B before you can solve problem C. We didn't move fast enough to be able to catch and reach this family. This family had been in the making over a decade before we were able to get that specific reform completely through the pipeline.
Why did the system fail 9-year-old Danae Roskev? According to DCYF, it was for the usual reasons. The department was understaffed and underfunded in conjunction with a heavy caseload. But how the system failed Danae was a different story. A report released in June 2019 by the Oversight Agency, the Office of the Child Advocate, placed much of the blame at DCYF's feet.
The report revealed the state ignored complaints about the adopted mother for years, ultimately concluding DCYF was partly to blame for the death.
Ignoring the fact that Michelle Roskev should have never been licensed as a foster parent in the first place due to past criminal behavior and financial uncertainty, DCYF ignored red flag after red flag for almost a decade. For example, in 2013, Michelle Roskev applied for and received free prescription baby formula from Rhode Island Department of Health. Later that year, the DOH discovered that Roskev was selling that formula on Craigslist, 100% profit. In 2015, Michelle Roskev herself expressed concern to DCYF about the unsanitary state of her house. However, the social worker who visited the home responded, quote, "I am not worried." So the department took no action. In 2018, Michelle Roskev received access to the second floor of her house during an unannounced visit from a DCYF worker. Roskev was actually flagged for that incident, but a follow-up investigation never occurred. 5 months later, DCYF approved Michelle Roskev's adoption of an 8th child.
Representative Charlene Lima went as far as calling for the resignation of DCYF Director Krista Patola during tonight's meeting. Every member of the House Oversight Committee asked her the same question. How did this happen? One representative said that this situation isn't evidence of a crack in the system. It's evidence of a black hole.
How does one lady get 8 special needs children? There will never be an answer that works for me.
The remaining 7 children were removed from the home after Danae's death. Michelle Roskev was ultimately charged with 1 count of manslaughter, 8 counts of child neglect, and 1 count of animal cruelty. She remained free on bond until her trial date.
Through the course of our investigations, what we discovered was a series of lapses in policy and in judgments that failed to detect significant changes in the ability of this mother to care for her children.
Meanwhile, DCYF attempted to address the department's critical deficiencies. 23 additional frontline workers were hired in addition to the revamped policy in the areas of licensing, placement, and investigation. The workers who had let Danae slip through the cracks were no longer employed at DCYF, although they hadn't been fired. Those employees had left on their own accord to pursue other opportunities. Too little, too late, in the values. Critics of DCYF complained that the changes were not drastic enough. DCYF Director Krista Patola knew that it would not be easy when she accepted her position. Sometimes progress happens incrementally, even when it's needed overnight. But it was her job, her responsibility to make things right.
This is what she signed up for, and she was committed to ushering in that progress. She promised, but there was still a lot of work to do.
I'm committed to
No.
what I said I would do when I came to Rhode Island. It is that is to make sure that we were reforming and transforming a system that had a lot of different needs. So I'm here, I'm committed, there's a lot of work still left to do.
A month later, Trista Picola's husband accepted a new job in Arizona.
First, we're working breaking news. DCYS Director Trista Picola is stepping down from her post in the next few months.
Trista Picola announced that she would be stepping down as DCYS Director. Any unfinished business would remain that way. Rhode Island's tarnished foster care program was now someone else's problem. Michelle Rothschild had also become someone else's problem. The former foster mother sold her spoiled home and started living out of her handicap-accessible van. She solicited a peaceful place to park on Facebook using a fake name.
Yes.
A farmer named George Whitford offered her a spot where she stayed for 5 months until he discovered the middle-aged woman's true identity.
George Whitford says he was conned into allowing a woman to live on his farmland. She was using this dead child as an excuse for people to feel sorry for her. When I found out who she was and read up on her, I was totally disgusted on who the person was in the backyard.
In August 2021, Michelle Rothschild pleaded no contest to the charges against her. On December 21st, 2021, she was scheduled for sentencing. The former foster mother spoke in court before her punishment was handed down. She apologized and accepted the shame and responsibility for what had happened.
This is emotionally shattered me. I love my children, but I'm ashamed. I'm very sorry.
Rothschild's lawyers indicated that their client had a long-standing record of excellence as a selfless foster mother, and that DCYF approached her repeatedly about fostering children with special needs. But state prosecutors painted a different picture of why she adopted so many children. They said Michelle Rothschild's motivations were narcissism and greed.
Narcissism and greed, not just the money, of which she received substantial amounts, but also greed for Facebook likes, for the social media publicity, and the stranger's messages praising her perceived selflessness and adopting special needs children.
Despite receiving $4,500 a month in subsidies from the state of Rhode Island to provide for her adopted children, Michelle Rothschild was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. She couldn't afford one child, much less 8. Turns out, social media clout doesn't pay the bills. Or does it? The more sickly the kids looked, the more sympathy she would receive, noted Rhode Island's Assistant Attorney General Lord Nicholson. Quote, the more community support by the way of gifts, even a fundraiser to fix her van. These children were neglected and suffered mental and emotional abuse. When they should have been learning and playing with friends in a community and school environment, they were hidden away, ripped up in mesh beds, covered in feces. The judge handed Michelle Rothschild the maximum allowed sentence of 18 years. She has lived a life of manipulating authority, he said, and added that there were disturbing patterns in which she either portrays herself as a victim or believes she has all the answers, or she manufactures excuses for everything or never accepts responsibility. The judge believes that Michelle Rothschild's chances of rehabilitation were poor.
The Superior Court judge called Michelle Rothschild narcissistic, abusive, and cruel. She ordered her to serve the maximum sentence on all 10 charges based on the plea agreement.
Rehabilitating Rhode Island's Department of Children, Youth, and Families would be just as challenging. In the 3 years since Renee Rothschild's death, the issues at her department have continued to mount. Most recently, on May 3rd, 2022, DCYF and Providence Police announced an investigation into the death of another child in foster care.
State lawmakers and union members say the state agency responsible for children's safety crisis and are demanding a top-to-bottom inspection. They called for the audit this afternoon following what they say are decades of problems at DCYF.
Decades of problems, a constant stream of bad news, from DCYF officers selling drugs out of company cars, to human trafficking in these contracted group homes, to data breaches and relying on unlicensed providers, child deaths and near deaths were all the
ignored. Something has to change. But after every tragedy, it's the same old song and dance from those in positions of authority. We're understaffed, we're underfunded. Meanwhile, neighboring states do more with less every day. No one has pounded the table harder for reform than a man named Nicholas Alaverdian. Nick spent much of his childhood in DCYF group homes and shelters. He'd witnessed the horrors firsthand and had spent his entire teenage and adult life advocating for change. He even sued the department for how he was treated under their watch. Nicholas Alaverdian knew that tumultuous childhood could result in adult monsters. Nicholas Alaverdian knew that because that's exactly what he became. The secret life of an outspoken advocate for Rhode Island foster children is revealed on this episode of Swindled. Support for Swindled comes from Honey Love. It's officially cozy season, which means soft sweaters, layered looks, and comfort on every level. I promise that will all just never go back. Treat yourself to the most comfortable and innovative bra on earth and save 20% off site-wide at honeylove.com/Swindled. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off honeylove.com/Swindled. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Experience the new standard in bras.
The Department of Children, Youth, and Families is a fundamentally flawed governmental agency that needs to be overseen by the state. Without this necessary
I'm gonna Google this dude's picture.
observation of the department, kids and teenagers and adolescents, people who were in the shoes that I was in 10 years ago, would not have a chance of being successful.
Nicholas Alaverdian was born on July 11th,
He looks like a creep.
1987 in Providence, Rhode Island.
Actually, he looks like
Diana's
he
younger
looks like he
accidentally hanged himself at age 13.
What the
while
frick?
trying to imitate a stunt that
What
he
the
performed on a
frick?
show.
Sorry, I stopped listening for 1 second. What happened?
Observation of the department, kids and teenagers and adolescents, people who were in the shoes that I was in 10 years ago, would not have a chance of being successful.
This new Power Washer is so good.
Nicholas Alaverdian was born on July 11th, 1987 in Providence, Rhode Island. He was named after his mother Diana's younger brother, who accidentally hanged himself at age 13
That's so
while trying to imitate a stunt he had seen performed on the Tonight Show. Darkness seemed to trail the Alaverdian family wherever they went. Nicholas's father, Jack Alaverdian, was mostly to blame. Jack was an alcoholic and an asshole. He was abusive to Diana and to Nicholas and to his younger brother. Jack was also consistently unemployed. Diana kept the family fed by waiting tables, but it was never enough.
Never enough.
About Jack and Diane are
Never
late
enough.
1989. Pregnant with a third child, Diana filed for divorce and a restraining order and moved out of the couple's apartment, taking the kids and nearly everything the couple owned. Nicholas never saw his father again. But if you were curious, Nicholas could have scanned the police blotter or court records to find out that his old man never changed. In the following years, Jack Alaverdian was arrested multiple times for domestic assault, protective order violations, selling cocaine, and writing fraudulent checks. Oh well, life goes on. Diana remarried in 1994. Her new husband, David Rossi, was an Engelbert Humperdinck impersonator and performed at a grill where she worked. David also adopted Diana's 3 children. It was the only way she would agree to marry him. Probably a mistake in retrospect. The kids were absolute terror, especially the oldest, 9-year-old Nicholas. He just wouldn't listen at school, David Rossi told the Providence Journal. He hit the mother, hit the grandmother all the time, and his siblings. I used to have to hold him down and he'd be spitting at him. We had counselors come in the house, Nicholas Alberti's behavior only grew worse as he got older. In 1999, he was admitted to a treatment program after being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and ADD. When he was discharged, Nicholas was sent to live with a foster family. Nicholas's mother was struggling with addiction at the time after her father died, and her marriage with David Rossi was falling apart. She was in no shape to raise 3 children.
Okay.
Ultimately, all 3 of the Alberti and Rossi siblings were homes in foster care. Nicholas was placed in Rhode Island's Department of Children's Youth and Families 9-9 program due to a lack of foster homes. A group of orphans was dumped at the Rhode Island State House at 5:30 a.m. every day, where they would wait for hours to find out which temporary shelter they would sleep at that night. They were fed fast food and given ancient magazines to read to pass the time. Nicholas Alberti repeated this process every day for 15 months, beginning in March 2002. He was 14 years old. It was a traumatic experience, to say the least. It's scary, ridiculously scary, Nicholas told journalist Bob Kerr. There were punks in there. They took my sneakers, my clothing. I was threatened, assaulted. I saw kids hit each other with hockey sticks. I never learned how to be a kid, Alberti said. If there were any silver lining to the constant emotional and physical abuse Nicholas Alberti suffered in DCYS 9-9 program, it's that he routinely brushed shoulders with some of Rhode Island's politicians in the state building. Nicholas was attracted to that environment. The red ties, the handshakes, the attention. Eventually, Nicholas talked his way into a job as a General Assembly page and legislative aide that reported directly to the Rhode Island Speaker of the House. According to Nicholas Alberti, he spent his days drafting legislation, communicating with constituents, and performing research before being shipped to whatever group home had an empty bed. He was still only 14 years old. But thanks to DCYS, Nicholas had a lot of life experience and a lot to say. The child welfare system in Rhode Island is broken, he would tell every street that pretended to listen. There's no schooling, there's not enough food, there's inadequate medical care, there's endless violence. Something must be done, Alberti demanded. Gee, kid, you sound like a lobbyist, a lawmaker once told him. Yeah, well, maybe I am. At 15 years old, Nicholas Alberti took a leave of absence from his government job and founded a group called Nexus Government, a nonprofit lobbying firm to advocate for the rights of children and adolescents who were wards of the state.
I chose to fight for the rights of myself as a kid in DCYS here and fight for the rights of those who are actually being
Nicholas recommended that every orphan attend one school and remain in that one school for the entire academic year. He urged the state to provide access to adequate medical care, and he demanded orphans be allowed to participate in extracurricular and academic activities. All reasonable and most would suggest good ideas. But according to Nicholas Alberti, those recommendations by his lobbying firm made him public enemy number 1. I was simply a political and publicity problem to lifetime bureaucrats with 6-figure salaries and low pensions, Alberti wrote in his book. It became a nuisance, always camped out in the Senate lounge, always buzzing in someone's ear. Eventually, Alberti claims, certain corrupt judges and lawmakers grew tired of his crusade. In 2002,
Crusade.
Nicholas Alberti was placed in a group home far away from Rhode Island, first to someplace called Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska, and later Manatee Palms in Sarasota, Florida. At these group homes, Alberti claims he was consistently abused. 9-9 was like Disneyland compared to Manatee Palms, he told the Providence Journal.
your worst nightmare. Multiply it by 5,000. There were rapes, there were beatings.
Nicholas Alberti described the facilities as for-profit, felon hiring, barbed wire kid jails next door to Walmart, where adolescents were sent without jury trial. He said there were fist-sized holes in every wall. Manatee Palms was just like a movie Fight Club, Alberti wrote. The staff kept him over-medicated. The caretaker named Rhonda raped him. It was torture. Nicholas was a self-described geeky and frail little boy who just wanted to read and listen to classical music.
Tantamount to Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib, and that's probably an understatement, is unacceptable, unconstitutional, and disgusting. It is repulsive. It is without interest to the ideals that frame this is the Constitution which we adhere to. At Manatee Palm, Nicholas Albertine had no contact with the outside world. He was not allowed to go to school. He was not allowed to speak to a lawyer or contact the clergy. There was no way to report the abuse he was experiencing. Nicholas was forced to sit in his room day after day, drooling on himself from his cocktail of medications. Pure hell for someone like himself, a self-reported genius with an exceptionally high IQ. By the time a caseworker from Rhode Island DCYF went to Florida to check on him, Nicholas Albertine was nearing 18 years old. He had officially become an adult, no longer property of the state. As soon as he was freed, Nicholas returned to Rhode Island, where he enrolled in classes at Providence College and Harvard Extension School. He also self-published a book reflecting on his time as a foster child and the resulting PTSD. Quote, "While I may no longer be the age of an orphan and am now an adult, I, like all adults, have had successes and failures. I do, however, still consider myself to be on that orphan-filled vagabond train of life, living with a sense of unrehearsed spontaneity. It is this Dickensian spirit that most orphans possess, this craggy magic bursting within us that pushes us ever further to the next train stop of life, listening for that whistle to blow until we are swept away in the next enthralling adventure. The years have passed by quite quickly, and much to my detriment. I attempt to remain enticed by that bright, thrilling excitement of life, but with illness, tragedy, loss, and the shackles of the horrific abuse that I experienced as a child at the hands of the state, it is ever so difficult to live and not feel as if death is nigh, to breathe and ponder one last and write and not be weary. But sometimes, even now, at night, I wake up and I'm ever so still as I fear that I am still there, still being beaten with a baseball bat, still having feces shoved down my throat and smeared across my face, still being injected with Thorazine in my buttocks, still being sexually assaulted, still being held against the wall with one hand tightly gripping my neck and my feet dangled below, still having urine poured on me in my sleep, still being kicked, punched, locked alone in a windowless dark closet ironically called the quiet room, without food or water for days on end. Still, still, still. Nicholas Albertine would never forget what happened to him, and he couldn't just sit on his hands while it was happening to someone else. So Albertine decided to put his education on hold and refocus on his original mission. Once again, Nicholas Albertine would become the public voice of the Rhode Island orphans. Most of the social workers that I know mean well, but they are not given resources, they are not given the time, they don't have the ability to do what they need to do to get their job done, and that's unacceptable. It's horrific. In early 2011, Nicholas Albertine finally got the government's attention. He filed multiple lawsuits against the state of Rhode Island, the DCYF, and several privately owned residential facilities that contracted with them. 18 individuals were named in the complaint, including Rhode Island's governor, the justice in Albertine, our state, and numerous lawyers, doctors, and social workers. Nicholas Albertine argued that state officials knowingly allowed the abuse of treatment to receive in Rhode Island's foster care system. He claimed the trauma associated with the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse he suffered left him unable to live a normal life. Albertine said he has flashbacks, nightmares, and chronic anxiety, and he wanted to be financially compensated.
Also new at noon, a federal judge is holding a hearing today on a lawsuit filed by a young man against the DCYF. Nicholas Albertine claims he was abused as a teenager while in state care. He's now 23 years old. The judge is set to hear several motions.
Nicholas Albertine also wanted Rhode Island lawmakers to adopt legislation that would improve the care of the youth in its custody. He wanted the state to establish an emergency oversight committee to review the activities of the DCYF. He wanted to establish a children's bill of rights because he claimed the foster system infringes on their constitutional rights. And he wanted out-of-state placements outlawed entirely so that no other innocent children could be abused as he had been. To rally support for his cause, Nicholas Albertine performed a media blitz. He sat down for interviews with local news channels, wrote opinion pieces for the local newspapers, and scheduled a press conference in the State House Rotunda to share his story with the world. I was subjected to torture, beatings, assault in various forms. I was refused
Department of Children, Youth, and Families issued a statement in response to Nicholas Albertian's claims. They said the department had no documented evidence of substantiated abuse and that their data does not suggest any pattern of widespread abuse in Rhode Island. Quote, any reported suspected abuse is fully investigated. We don't know what Mr. Albertian's specific allegations are, but we'll clearly be happy to investigate them if they are provided to us. DCYF also defended its extensive practice of sending kids out of state. Kevin Auckland, the department's deputy director at the time, told the New Hampshire Register that there are children who come into their care with highly specialized treatment needs for which the department must go outside the state to identify the programs best suited for those children. Not ideal, but they deal with complex behavior and psychological needs that cannot be met at a local facility. In January 2012, Representative Roberto da Silva of East Providence introduced Albertian's proposed legislation to Rhode Island's House of Representatives, but it was never adopted. The bill died in committee after the Rhode Island Family Court Chief Justice issued a letter to Genoa Assembly leaders opposing the measure. Albertian's lawsuits, on the other hand, were still alive. That same year, Nicholas Albertian received a letter from the state. As soon as he read it, Nicholas knew they were out for retribution.
A former orphan who was in DCYF custody received a medical bill for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The letter comes while Albertian is suing this long list of former and current state officials and the DCYF for how he was treated while in state care. He alleges he was physically and sexually assaulted while he was moved in and out of some 20 group homes in 3 states.
And it shows that even though I paid in blood, I still have some worth to the state of Rhode Island as a dollar sign apparently. And it's incredibly despicable.
Nicholas Albertian refused to pay the $207,000 to the Executive Office of Health and Human Services that he owed for various medical expenses he accrued while in state custody. But in August 2013, Albertian did agree to settle his lawsuit against the state if the medical lien against him was waived. The state of Rhode Island did not acknowledge any liability concerning Albertian's claims. They said that the lien referred to Medicaid funds spent on behalf of Albertian, which, by law, the state was required to attempt to recoup as he was suing them. Nicholas Albertian also received $70,000 as part of the settlement, but that amount was not disclosed. In the following year, Nicholas Albertian relocated to Ohio, launched a nonprofit to rebuild the city of Dayton, and moved out of the country. In January
Dayton.
2020, he reignited his campaign against Rhode Island's DCYF. It was his last opportunity to make a difference. Nicholas Albertian had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Unfortunately, this has come much too soon in my life, he told radio station WPRO. I'm only 32 years old, and I wish I had the ability to live much longer to accomplish the things that I set about to do so many years ago. To this day, the legislation has not been passed. That's very unfortunate, considering the amount of damage that this does to children and adolescents when they are sent so far from home and so far from New England. Providence Representative Raymond Holt reintroduced the Albertian's bill on February 14, 2020, and once again, it did not pass. 2 weeks later, Nicholas Albertian died. His crusade was incomplete, but his legacy still very much alive. Reports for Swindle Troops and Bombers. Fall's here. The kids are back in school. Vacations are done. And cozy season has officially started, which means time to slide into the Bombas. You know Bombas, the most comfortable spots, slippers.
You know Bombas.
All made from premium materials built for this time of year. Spots that are practically made for fall. And it's not just socks. Bombas have slippers too. The Shredder line Sunday slippers that make it hard to leave the house. The slippery slippers, perfect for travel, even waterproof Friday slides. But here's the best part. For every item you buy, Bombas donates one to someone experiencing homelessness. That's over 150 million items donated to Safe Flash.
Good evening in the Revolution Southwest News Center in Falls and Gary with the 8 o'clock WPRO news. Senators to pass along the voice you've heard on the air here on WPRO. Nicholas Albertian, he grew
February 29th, 2020, various associates and journalists received an email from the Albertian family office. It was from Louise Albertian, Nicholas's wife, informing those who might have known him that he had lost his battle with cancer. No words can express what had happened, she wrote. Nicholas was always such a person that had energy and life and belief in his cause. Never seen a warrior for foster children. Rhode Island and the world had lost someone who really went to work for children. Louise Albertian said she took Nick to the hospital on Friday the 28th. He was having complications because cancer had recently spread to his kidneys and lungs. He died the following day. He always had a real affinity for the ocean, Louise wrote. She said she had promised them that she would scatter his ashes at sea. In a situation where Nicholas Albertian was posted online soon after, was quite verbose, nearly 1,000 words long, but it provided more detail about the Crusader's final moments. At the bedside were Mrs. Albertian, their two children, and extended family. His last words were, quote, "Fear not, I run toward the bullets of the sun." At the time of his passing, the obituary reads, "The room was filled with the sounds of the end credits for the 1997 film Contact by composer Alan Silvestri, a film and score that held special meaning." In Rhode Island, Nicholas Albertian held special meaning to those who worked with him. But a news spread, members of the Rhode Island House of Representatives introduced a condolence resolution to remember their old friend publicly and the causes for which he spent his life fighting. Lawmakers were urged to honor Nicholas by Nicholas's widow, Louise.
I was in memory of my friend, from the people made up of also Nicholas Albertian, who had a battle with cancer. Very smart individual. I started here some 8 years ago. And I say this on purpose. I say this to the young people that are sitting there. Have passion in what you do and what you're about. He had that. And it touched me to be honest to get up to say something on his behalf today. Because he believed in something that happened to him. And he looked forward to the change in DCYF. I ask that all my colleagues remember him. God bless. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hall, thank you for putting this in. And I remember Nicholas coming in here and advocating, and he certainly had his challenges in life, and he tried to fight through them all. His passing is a very, very sad incident for us, and may you rest in peace, Nicholas.
Not so fast. Many people were skeptical that Nicholas Albertian had died, and they have their reasons. First of all, that obituary is ridiculous. "Fear not, and run towards the bliss of the sun." Those were his last words. Give me a break. The entire thing reads like a list of greatest hits written by a self-important narcissist. And according to many, that's exactly who Nicholas Albertian was, or is. Secondly, those who tried to confirm Nicholas's death independently were never able to do so. Many of the journalists who received that email from Louise Albertian notifying them of his passing never reported on the story because they had no concrete evidence of its truth. They couldn't look up local records because Louise had refused to tell them where they lived. It was a security issue, she told them. Louise said the family had received threats resulting from Nicholas's battle with the DCYF. Finally, there was a motive for Nicholas to disappear. It just wasn't public yet. But authorities in Ohio and Utah knew, and obviously, Nicholas Albertian did too. It all started more than 15 years earlier at Sinclair Community College in Dayton. January 2008, a woman said she met Nicholas Albertian on MySpace. He was going by the name Nicholas Rossi. He invited her to lunch one day. She accepted. After their meal, Nicholas Rossi escorted the woman to her next class, but cornered her in the basement stairwell. She said Rossi pinned her against the wall and started groping her while masturbating.
What?
That woman told the Providence Journal that she told him to get off of her, and he replied, "I'm almost done. Don't be a bitch." And then he ejaculated onto the wall.
What?
The woman said she went to class afterwards, and when she came out, there he was,
Nice.
She met Nicholas Rossi on MySpace, and then he had assaulted her the exact same way. Nicholas Rossi was charged with 1 count of sexual imposition and 1 count of public indecency. He spent the next 6 years fighting the case. Nicholas Rossi also spent the next 6 years trying to discredit and harass his accuser. He posted numerous photos of his children online, along with his name and address and phone number. To garner sympathy, he showed up to court hearings with a cane and a limp. After he was convicted, Nicholas Rossi fabricated evidence to reflect the trial. It photoshopped MySpace blog posts, and thus the victim admitted to lying under oath. Luckily for her, Nicholas, the genius, picked the wrong day of the week for the corresponding date the blog was supposedly published. Not a mistake a computer would make. The only explanation was human error. The judge denied Nicholas Rossi's motion. His name would appear on the sex offenders registry until 2023. In response, Nicholas Rossi sued his accuser for libel. He accused the woman of besmirching his good name by posting about him online. The judge threw the case out, having found no merit in Nicholas Rossi's claim. Nicholas Rossi was not pleased. He joined men's rights activist groups online and adopted incel-like beliefs. He self-published an essay titled My Personal 9/11, and she blamed his victim for ruining his life. Her acts are tantamount to flying planes into my twin pillars of personal success and
What?
apparently jet fuel can melt incel dreams.
That's
In
funny.
2008, Nicholas Rossi relocated to Orem, Utah. He started dating a 21-year-old woman he met on MySpace. After a few
Oh, get off my space.
that woman broke up with Rossi, and he became unwelcomingly violent during sex. He was always borrowing money that he never paid back. Rossi apologized and invited his ex-girlfriend over to his apartment, where he promised to repay what he owed. Instead, when the woman arrived on the evening of September 14, 2008, Nicholas Rossi blocked the exit. He pushed her onto the couch, unzipped his pants, and violently raped her. This is your fault, he told her. You are mentally unstable and too emotional to deal with. The woman escaped the apartment, and Rossi became distracted by a text message. She reported to a local hospital and told them she had been sexually assaulted by her ex.
The woman told police the two were dating, but Aliberian, who went by Nicholas Rossi, became increasingly rough with her. The woman told police he owed her money, and Aliberian lured her to his apartment, promising to repay her, but instead sexually assaulted her.
By the end of 2009, Nicholas Rossi escaped Utah and returned to Rhode Island, where he rented an apartment in Pawtucket. In July 2010, he invited over a woman he had been chatting with online. He was an artist. What a coincidence. He was too. You should come check out my art studio, he told her. When the woman arrived, there was no art studio, just a sad, horny man blocking the door and breathing heavily. Rossi snatched the woman's cell phone out of her hands and hid it somewhere in his apartment. Just come sit on my lap and please just kiss me. When the woman refused, Nicholas Rossi became more desperate and manipulative. He told her that he would kill himself by sliding a knife into his heart if she left. The woman started screaming and demanded her phone back. Rossi didn't want to alert his neighbors, so he relented. The woman left the apartment and walked to a nearby grocery store. She told the clerk that she had been held against her will. The cops arrived at Nicholas Rossi's apartment to question him. No charges were filed, but he was taken to a local hospital for a psychological evaluation. 5 months later, police were again called to Nicholas Rossi's apartment. This time, a visibly upset woman answered the door, kept swelling around her eyes and marks on her neck and arms. Rossi and the woman continued to scream at one another in the office's presence. According to the police, the dispute resulted from Rossi getting upset about the visiting attorney's crying child. Tempers flared until Nicholas Rossi slapped the woman to the ground. That's when she called the cops. He was arrested on the spot and on his way to jail caused quite the scene. Police had to physically carry Rossi out of his apartment and pepper spray him in
Less than a month later, the police in Pawtucket received another report about Nicholas Rossi. A woman reported that she had gone on a date with Nicholas the previous night after the two had met online. She said they went back to his apartment afterwards. They spent the entire evening begging for sex, but she was denied his advances. Enraged, Nicholas Rossi demanded the woman pay him back for dinner. He drove her car to an ATM and forced the woman to withdraw $200. She had no choice, the woman said. She was afraid for her life. Nicholas Rossi then drove the woman back to his apartment, where he forced her to sign a paper while he video recorded with some kind of legal document that stated that she was forfeiting her rights to pursue legal action against him, and that the money she gave him was for therapy for him due to her violent actions and her sexual addiction. That woman did not press charges, but the next one did. In May 2011, Nicholas Rossi's wife of 6 months walked into the Pawtucket police station. She said her husband, who she was in the process of divorcing, had violated the restraining order he had against him. Rossi kept calling her and threatening her. He was afraid that he was going to kill her. The visibly shaken woman reported. A warrant was issued for Nicholas Rossi's arrest. But it wasn't all bad news for the 25-year-old serial accuser and rapist. In 2013, the Rhode Island DCYF offered to settle the lawsuit that Rossi's horse and crusading alter ego Nicholas Alexander had filed against him 2 years earlier. A $70,000 windfall. It was time to celebrate. Nicholas Rossi contacted his adopted stepfather, David Rossi, for the first time in years. Nicholas demanded that David meet him for dinner at Fleming's Steakhouse. David Rossi told the Providence Journal that Nicholas was trying to impress a girl by throwing his money around and introducing her to the Humperdinck impersonators. When Nicholas excused himself to the restroom that evening, David said the young woman with Nicholas confided in him. Quote, she said, "Mr. Rossi, I've been trying to shake him for 2 weeks. He won't leave me alone." Feeling unwelcome in his home state, Nicholas Rossi reverted to Nicholas Alberti and returned to Dayton, Ohio. There, the Crusader found a new cause to champion: public and political recognition of the Armenian genocide. Alberti was made an appearance on the local news to educate the people.
I think the most important thing to remember here is that the Pope recognized this as the first genocide of the 20th century. We are not dealing with a single shooting